Davis thought he had married the most beautiful woman in the world. Her skin was soft and smooth, and her voice was sweet like music. But he had no idea that every single night while he was sleeping, his wife was doing something terrible. In a beautiful place called the village of Kodo, the ground was covered in bright red dust that looked like magic powder. The sun was always warm and yellow, shining down on tall green trees and happy people. In this village lived a young man named Davis. Davis was very strong and very kind. He had big muscles because he worked on his farm every single day from the moment the sun came up. He planted corn, yams, and sweet fruits. Everyone in Kodo liked Davis because he always helped elderly people carry their heavy water pots and shared his food with anyone who was hungry. But even though Davis was strong and had a big farm, he was very lonely. He lived in a small, clean house with his mother. His mother was old and had hair as white as a cloud. She often sat by the door and sighed. She wanted Davis to find a wife so that the house would be full of laughter and the sound of little children playing in the dirt. Davis wanted this too. He would look at the moon at night and wish for someone special to talk to. He didn't want just any girl. He wanted a girl who was kind and special. He waited for a long time, hoping his heart would tell him when the right person arrived. But he did not know that a big mystery was coming to Kodo, and his life was about to change in a way that was both wonderful and very scary. One day, just as the sky was turning purple and orange at sunset, a stranger walked into the village. Her name was Zina. The moment she stepped into Kodo, everything went quiet. The birds stopped chirping, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Zina was the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. Her skin was as smooth as a river stone and as dark as the night sky. She wore a long blue dress that was the color of the deep ocean, and she had tiny white shells in her hair that made a soft clicking sound when she moved. She walked with her head held high and had a smile that made everyone feel like they were in a beautiful dream. Davis began to visit Zina every day. He wanted her to know that he was a good man. He brought her the best things from his farm. One day, he brought her a giant sweet mango that smelled like sunshine. Another day, he brought her a beautiful flower that only grew on the highest hill. Zina was always very nice to Davis. She would sit with him under the shade of a big tree and tell him stories about golden cities and talking animals. Her voice was as sweet as honey. When she laughed, it sounded like little silver bells. Davis felt so happy when he was with her. He felt like he was the luckiest man in the whole world. He started to think that Zina was the answer to all his prayers. The other young men in the village were jealous because they wanted Zina to like them too. But Zina only wanted to talk to Davis. She told him that she liked his kind eyes and the way he took care of his mother. Davis was so in love that he didn't notice how Zina never seemed to eat any food when people were watching. He didn't notice that she never went near the river during the day. He was only thinking about her beautiful face and how much he wanted her to stay in Kodo forever. After a few weeks, Davis decided he wanted to marry Zina. He took his mother and the village elders to see her. They brought gifts to show they were serious. Zina looked at Davis for a long time. Her eyes were very bright, almost like they were glowing. She said she would marry him, but she had one very strange rule. She told Davis that she had a secret ritual she had to do every single night. "Davis," she said in a very serious voice, "I will be your wife and I will love you, but every night at midnight I must wash my face with water from a special clay pot. During that time, you must never look at me. You must turn your head away and keep your eyes closed until I am finished. If you ever look at me while I am washing my face, a very bad thing will happen, and our love will be broken forever." Davis was so happy she said yes that he didn't care about the strange rule. He thought it was just a funny habit. "I promise," he shouted. "I will never look. I only want to be with you." He gave her a beautiful copper ring, and they began to plan the biggest wedding the village had ever seen. The wedding day was full of joy. The whole village of Kodo came to celebrate. There were big drums that went boom, 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 and everyone danced in the red dust. There was so much food that everyone's belly was full. Zina looked like a queen in her blue dress and gold beads. Davis's mother danced until she was tired and happy. But there was one old woman named Mama Grace who did not dance. Mama Grace was very wise and could see things that other people missed. She watched Zina very closely. She noticed that when Zina stood in the sun, her shadow didn't have any eyes or a mouth. It was just a blank, dark shape. This made Mama Grace very worried. Tried to tell Davis's mother, but the music was too loud and everyone was having so much fun. Mama Grace shook her head and whispered a prayer to the spirits. As the moon rose high in the sky, Davis led Zina to his house. The party was over and it was time for their new life to start. As the clock of the stars reached midnight, Zina stood up and walked to the corner of the room where a big clay pot of water was waiting. Davis remembered his promise. He turned his back and closed his eyes tight. He heard the sound of water splashing. Then he heard a very strange sound, like someone peeling a banana, but it was much louder and wetter. He felt a shiver run down his back, but he kept his eyes closed, just like he promised. As the weeks went by, life in the house of Davis felt very strange. During the day, Zina was the perfect wife. She would sweep the floor until it was clean enough to eat off of. She would cook big pots of spicy soup that made the whole neighborhood smell good. But every single night, when the moon reached the highest part of the sky, the air inside their small house would turn very, very cold. It was so cold that Davis could see his own breath coming out in little white puffs of smoke. He would lie very still under his blanket, keeping his eyes closed tight. He would hear the soft pitter-patter of Zina's feet as she walked to the big clay pot in the corner. Then the splashing would begin. It was a slow, wet sound, but the scariest part was the sound that came after the water. It was a loud rip, rip, rip sound, like someone was pulling a big sticker off a wall. Davis's heart would beat very fast, like a little drum. He wanted to look so badly. He wanted to know why his wife made such a scary sound in the middle of the night, but he remembered his promise. He was afraid that if he looked, he would lose her forever. He felt a strange pull in his mind, like a dream trying to tell him something was wrong. He tried to tell himself that everything was okay, but the cold air and the peeling sound made it very hard to sleep. He started to feel like there was a heavy shadow living in his house, even when the sun was shining bright outside. While Davis was trying to be a good husband, something very sad was happening in the village of Kodo. It started with a young girl named Lola. Lola was famous for having the most beautiful, bright eyes in the whole land. But one morning, Lola woke up and her eyes looked gray and tired, like old stones. A few days later, another girl named Bissy woke up, and her skin looked very old and wrinkled, even though she was only a teenager. One by one, the pretty girls of the village were losing their beauty. They felt very weak and could not even walk to the market. Their mothers were crying, and the village healers were very confused. They gave the girls special leaves and roots to eat, but nothing worked. The strange thing was that as the other girls became less beautiful, Zina became even more beautiful. Her skin was glowing so much it was almost hard to look at her. Her eyes were getting bigger and brighter every single day. When Zina walked through the village, she didn't look sad for the sick girls. Instead, she looked at them with a very strange smile, like she was holding a secret. Davis noticed this, and it made him feel very worried in his stomach. He saw how Zina would touch her own face and laugh quietly when she heard that another girl had lost her glow. It felt like the happiness of his house was built on the sadness of the village, and that felt very wrong to him. One evening, Davis's best friend, Ayor, came to visit. Ayor was a brave hunter who went deep into the forest to find food. He looked very pale and his hands were shaking. He pulled Davis away from the house so Zina could not hear them. "Davis, you are my brother, so I must tell you the truth," he whispered. His voice was shaking with fear. "Last night, I was hiding in the bushes near the great stream. I saw a woman sitting by the water. She was wearing a blue dress just like your wife's. But Davis, she wasn't drinking water. She was holding a wooden bowl, and inside the bowl there was a face. It looked like Lola's face. The woman was rubbing it on her own head, and she was singing a song that sounded like 1,000 bees. Davis felt a hot wave of anger. He didn't want to believe that his beautiful Zina could do something so scary. "Stop it," Davis shouted. "You are just jealous because my wife is the prettiest woman in Kodo. Go away and don't come back with these lies." Ayor looked at him with very sad eyes. "I am not lying, Davis. Look at her shadow. Look at her eyes when you think she isn't watching. Something is stealing the life from our village, and it lives in your house." After Ayor left, Davis sat by the fire for a long time. He felt like his heart was being pulled in two different directions. He loved Zina, but he was starting to feel a deep inner warning, a fear and doubt he could no longer push away. The next day, Davis's little sister, Grace, came to stay with them. Grace was only 10 years old, and she was the joy of the whole family. She had a round, happy face and a smile that made everyone feel good. Zina was very nice to Grace. She brushed her hair and gave her sweet pieces of sugarcane. But Davis saw something that made his skin crawl. While Zina was brushing Grace's hair, she was staring at Grace's face very, very closely. She ran her long fingers along Grace's cheeks as if she were feeling a piece of fruit she wanted to eat. "You have such a perfect little face," Zina whispered. Her voice sounded deep and hungry, not like a sweet wife at all. "It is so fresh and so new. It would be a very good face to wear for a long time." Grace giggled because she thought Zina was playing a game, but Davis felt a big lump of fear in his throat. That night, he could not eat his dinner. He kept looking at his little sister and then at his wife. He felt like a trap was closing in on them. His spirit knew the truth before his eyes could see it. It was telling him that Grace was in big danger. He decided that he would not sleep at all that night. He would stay awake and listen to everything, even if he kept his eyes closed to keep his promise. It was the middle of the night, and the village was so quiet you could hear a leaf fall. Little Grace was sleeping on a soft mat in the corner of the room. She was breathing slowly and looked like a little angel. Davis lay on his bed, pretending to be asleep. Suddenly, the room turned ice cold again. He heard Zina get up. She didn't walk like a normal person. Her steps sounded heavy and wet, like someone walking through mud. Squelch, squelch, squelch. She reached the clay pot. Davis heard the water splashing. Then he heard the most terrifying sound yet. Rip, rip, rip. It sounded like a piece of heavy cloth being torn in half. Then there was a wet slap on the floor. Davis's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. He heard Zina moving across the room, but she wasn't going back to bed. She was moving toward the corner where Grace was sleeping. He could hear her breathing. It was a rough, scary sound like a monster. "Such a pretty girl," Zina hissed. "Her face will fit me perfectly. I will take it now, and no one will ever know." Davis felt a scream building up in his throat. He had a choice to make. He had promised never to look, but if he didn't look, his little sister might lose her beautiful face forever. The suspense was so thick it felt like he was underwater. He gripped his hands into fists and got ready to do the one thing he was told never to do. Davis lay as still as a fallen log, but his heart was shouting inside his chest. The room was so cold now that he felt like he was sleeping inside a block of ice. He could hear the heavy, wet steps of Zina getting closer and closer to his little sister Grace. Squelch, slap, squelch. It was the sound of something raw and wet hitting the floorboards. Davis's mind was racing. He thought about all the happy times he had spent with Grace, playing in the red dust and eating sweet mangoes. He thought about how his mother would cry if anything happened to her youngest child. The quiet love he had for his family was stronger than any spell Zina had placed on him. He realized that the woman he loved was not really a woman at all. She was a mask that hid something very dark and very hungry. He remembered the words of wise old Mama Grace and his friend Ayor. They had tried to tell him, but he had been too blinded by a beautiful face. Now the truth was right there in the dark room with him. He could smell something strange, like old water and copper. It was the smell of the deep fear he had been hiding from himself. He knew he had to act. He couldn't wait another second. If he waited, Grace would wake up without her beautiful smile, and her life would be stolen away, just like the other girls in the village. He felt a sudden burst of energy, like a spark of fire in his soul. He reached out his hand and felt for the small oil lamp sitting on the table next to his bed. His fingers were shaking, but he gripped it tight. He took a deep breath, and with a loud shout that echoed through the whole house, he struck a match and lit the lamp. The light from the lamp was bright and yellow. For a moment, Davis had to blink his eyes, but when he finally saw what was standing over his sister, he wanted to scream until his throat was sore. Zina was there, but she was not the Zina he knew. She was standing tall, but her head was a nightmare. She had no eyes, no nose, no lips. Her whole head was just raw red muscle that pulsed and moved like it was alive. It looked like someone had turned a person inside out. There were 2 dark, empty holes where her eyes should have been, and they were glowing with a mean red light. On the floor, right next to the water pot, lay the mask of Zina. It looked like a thin, empty bag made of skin, with the long hair and the pretty shells still attached to it. The monster was holding a shimmering, invisible blade over Grace's sleeping face, ready to cut the beauty away. When the light hit the monster, it let out a sound so loud and so scary that the windows rattled. It wasn't a human voice. It sounded like 1,000 angry spirits all screaming at once. "You looked," the monster howled, and the sound made Davis's ears hurt. "You broke the sacred promise, little man. Now there is no more hiding. Now I will take everything from you." The monster turned away from Grace and looked at Davis with those dark, empty pits. Davis felt a wave of pure terror wash over him, but he didn't run. He stood his ground, holding the lamp high. He realized that the monster was only powerful when it was hidden in the dark. In the light, it looked small and ugly. Little Grace woke up and saw the faceless horror standing in the middle of the room. She let out a piercing scream and crawled into the corner, shaking with fear. The fight was no longer a secret. It was a battle for their lives. The faceless monster did not wait. It launched at Davis with a speed faster than any leopard in the forest. Its wet red arms reached out, trying to grab the lamp from Davis's hand. Davis jumped to the side, his heart thumping against his ribs like a trapped bird. He felt a sharp sting on his shoulder as the monster's claws grazed his skin. "Stay back, Grace!" Davis shouted, his voice cracking with fear and bravery. He grabbed a heavy wooden stool from the floor and swung it with all his might. The stool hit the monster with a loud thwack, but it was like hitting a giant bag of jelly. The creature didn't even fall. It just hissed and grew taller, its empty eye pits glowing even brighter with a mean red fire.
A sudden fire rose within him, and he knew he had to fight with both strength and wisdom. He realized that fighting this monster was like fighting a stubborn weed in his farm. He had to be strong, and he had to be smart. He looked around the room for anything that could help him. The monster was moving toward Grace again, its wet feet leaving red marks on the floor. Davis knew he had to do something big. He grabbed a large bag of salt that his mother used for cooking and ripped it open. He remembered an old story that monsters made of raw magic could not stand the touch of salt. With a loud cry, he threw the white salt all over the red, pulsing body. The creature let out a scream that sounded like metal rubbing against stone. Smoke began to rise from its skin, and it backed away, clawing at its own face. This was the moment Davis needed. He had to find the source of its power before it could recover and attack them again. Davis's eyes darted to the corner of the room where the mysterious clay pot sat. The water inside was glowing with a strange, shimmering light. It wasn't normal water anymore. It was full of the beauty that had been stolen from the girls of Kodo. The deep part of Davis's brain told him that the pot was the monster's heart. If he broke the pot, he would break the spell. The faceless creature realized what he was thinking and let out a terrifying roar. It tried to jump over Davis to protect the pot, but Davis was faster. He used his strong farming legs to leap across the room. He reached the pot just as the cold, wet fingers touched his neck. With a final, desperate burst of strength, Davis lifted the heavy clay pot high above his head and slammed it down onto the hard floor. Crack! The pot shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. The glowing water splashed everywhere, soaking the floor and the monster's feet. The effect was instant. The monster began to shake and vibrate so hard that the whole house started to tremble. The mask on the floor turned to black ash and blew away in a sudden wind. The creature's red body began to melt, turning into a dark, oily mist that smelled like a swamp. It let out one last long wail of sorrow and anger before it vanished into the air. The room became very quiet, and the freezing cold was replaced by a soft, warm breeze. Davis fell to his knees, gasping for air. He looked over at Grace, who was still shaking in the corner. "It's okay, little sister," he whispered. "The monster is gone. The secret is over." He felt a deep sense of relief knowing that his family was finally safe from the dark magic. When the sun began to rise over the village of Kodo, it brought a miracle with it. The red dust of the village square was bathed in a beautiful golden light. In their houses, the girls who were sick and tired, Lola, Bissy, and all the others, suddenly opened their eyes. They felt a rush of energy, like a cool drink of water on a hot day. They looked in their mirrors and gasped with joy. Their bright eyes were back. Their smooth, glowing skin had returned. The beauty that had been stolen by the face stealer had flown back to its rightful owners the moment the clay pot was broken. The village was filled with the sound of laughter and singing once again. Davis's mother came to the house and hugged Davis and Grace so tight they could hardly breathe. She was so proud of her son for being brave enough to look at the truth. Davis looked at his village with new eyes. He realized that he had been very foolish to care so much about a pretty face. He had almost lost his life and his sister because he wanted a perfect wife. From that day on, Davis became a very wise man. He eventually married a girl from Kodo named Ane. She didn't have a magical face or a mysterious blue dress. She was just a normal girl with a kind heart and a loud, happy laugh. But to Davis, she was the most beautiful woman in the world because her beauty was real. It wasn't a mask that could be peeled off. It was a light that lived inside her soul. The people of Kodo never forgot the story of the bride with the stolen face. They taught their children that true love is about seeing what is on the inside, and they lived happily ever after in their beautiful village of red dust and golden sunshine. Did the ending of The Face Stealer shock you? We have many more stories from African folktales to share. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale of mystery and African magic.